54. St. George, Utah. A small desert town 137 miles from Las Vegas. Population 4,562. Quiet. Mormon community. Farming families. Children playing in the streets. And every few weeks the ground shakes. Windows rattle. A flash of light appears on the northern horizon, brighter than the sun. Then, hours later, grey ash falls from the sky like snow. The government calls it harmless. The Atomic Energy Commission sends representatives to town meetings. There is no danger. The fallout cannot reach you. Continue your normal lives. But the sheep are dying. 4,390 sheep dead in a single year. Faces burned, wool falling out. Ranchers find them in piles. The government says it's malnutrition. March 1955. John Wayne arrives in St. George to scout locations for his next film, The Conqueror. He sees the Red Rock Canyons, the endless desert, the mountains. Perfect for playing Genghis Khan. He doesn't see the invisible poison in the soil. Nobody tells him that 100 miles north, military has detonated 11 nuclear bombs in the last 2 years. Nobody mentions that one of those bombs, Harry, was 32 kilotons, twice the size of Hiroshima. Nobody says the word radioactive. And John Wayne, trusting his government, brings 220 people to film in a place that will kill them. Let's start with what John Wayne didn't know in 1955. Between 1951 and 1963, the U.S. military conducted 100 above-ground nuclear bomb tests at the Nevada test site. The mushroom clouds rose 40,000 feet into the atmosphere. Desert winds carried radioactive particles, cesium-137, strontium-90, iodine-131, hundreds of miles across Nevada and Utah. The town of St. George, Utah, sat directly in the fallout zone. Residents called it downwind. Government scientists called it low-level exposure. Both were lies. The radiation levels in St. George in 1953 were higher than in Chernobyl's exclusion zone after the 1986 disaster. But in 1955, the Atomic Energy Commission was telling Americans that atomic energy was safe, that testing was necessary for national security, that a little radiation never hurt anyone, and people believed them. Why wouldn't they? This was the government. The same government that won World War II, that defeated the Nazis, that promised to protect American citizens. John Wayne believed them too. He was a patriot. He loved America. He trusted authority. So when RKO Studios chose St. George, Utah as the filming location for The Conqueror, and when the Atomic Energy Commission sent representatives to reassure everyone that the area was completely safe, Wayne didn't question it. He should have. The Conqueror was supposed to be John Wayne's epic masterpiece. He would play Temujin, the man who became Genghis Khan. RKO Pictures poured $6 million into the production, a massive budget for 1955. They hired Susan Hayward as the female lead, a future Oscar winner, one of Hollywood's brightest stars. They brought in Pedro Armendariz, the legendary Mexican. They assembled a cast and crew of 220 people, and they spent 13 weeks filming in the desert outside St. George, Utah, from June to September 1954. 13 weeks. 91 days, in soil contaminated with radioactive fallout from 11 nuclear explosions. The crew built elaborate sets in the desert, massive Mongol encampments, battle scenes with hundreds of extras, horses, camels, dust, constant dust. That dust was radioactive. Every breath, every gust of wind, every time an actor fell in the dirt during a fight scene, they were inhaling particles of cesium-137 and strontium-90. The crew ate lunch sitting on the ground. Radioactive ground. The actors laid in the dirt for hours between takes, resting, joking, breathing in poison, and on set there was a Geiger counter. The production team brought one just to check, a safety precaution. It clicked constantly, loudly, so loudly that John Wayne joked it must be broken. It wasn't broken. It was screaming a warning nobody understood. Before we go further, you need to understand something about John Wayne in 1954. He was 47 years old, the biggest movie star in America, the face of American masculinity and patriotism. But he carried a secret shame. John Wayne never served in World War II. While men like Jimmy Stewart, Clark Gable, and director John Ford went overseas and risked their lives, Wayne stayed in Hollywood making movies. He had deferments. 4 children, age 34, when Pearl Harbor was bombed, a studio contract that classified him as essential to the war effort. Legally, he didn't have to serve. Morally, he felt like a coward. His mentor, director John Ford, despised him for it. During the filming of They Were Expendable in 1945, Ford publicly humiliated Wayne in front of the cast and crew. "Duke, can't you manage a salute that at least looks like you've been in the service?" Wayne was so enraged and ashamed that he walked off the set. The only time in his career he ever did that. That shame never left. For the rest of his life, Wayne tried to prove his patriotism through his films, through his politics, through his unwavering support of the U.S. military and government. So in 1955, when the Atomic Energy Commission, a government agency, told him that filming in St. George was safe, Wayne believed them without question. To question the government was to be un-American, and John Wayne would never be un-American. That loyalty would kill him. June 1954. Filming begins. The cast and crew arrive in St. George, a tiny desert town unprepared for a Hollywood invasion. The temperatures reach 120 degrees. The desert wind never stops. Red dust coats everything: cameras, costumes, food, skin, lungs. Susan Hayward, playing Bortai, Genghis Khan's love interest, spends hours in the sun filming battle scenes. She's 36 years old, beautiful, talented, at the peak of her career. She'll be dead in 21 years. Cancer. Pedro Armendariz plays one of Khan's. He's a legend in Mexican cinema, strong, charismatic, 42 years old. He'll be dead in 9 years. Cancer. He'll shoot himself in the head rather than endure the agony. Agnes Moorehead plays Temujin's mother. Veteran actress, beloved, 54 years old. She'll die in 20 years. Cancer. Dick Powell directs the film. Talented, respected, 49 years old. Dead in 9 years. Cancer. And John Wayne, playing Genghis Khan in heavy makeup and costume, filming fight scenes in the radioactive dust for 13 weeks. He'll develop lung cancer in 10 years, stomach cancer in 25 years. Both will kill him. But in June 1954, none of them know. They're making a movie. They're laughing between takes. They're eating sandwiches, sitting in contaminated dirt. They're breathing. And 100 miles north, at the Nevada test site, the military keeps testing. Operation Castle. Operation Teapot. Bomb after bomb after bomb. The wind carries the fallout south, over the Red Rock Canyons, over the film set, over 220 people who trust their government. September 1954. Filming wrap. The cast and crew return to Hollywood. But they don't leave the radiation behind. Because RKO Studios made a decision that would prove catastrophic, they brought 60 tons of radioactive dirt back to Hollywood. 60 tons. They shipped it in trucks from St. George to Los Angeles so they could film interior scenes on a soundstage with authentic desert dirt. For months, actors worked on that soundstage, walking through the dirt, sitting in it. breathing particles of cesium-137 into their lungs. The contamination spread. Costume departments cleaned the dusty clothes. Props departments stored the soil. Janitors swept the sound stages, all of them exposed, all of them at risk, and nobody knew. The movie premiered in 1956. It bombed. Audiences hated it. Critics destroyed it. John Wayne playing Genghis Khan with an eye patch and a Western accent? Ridiculous. The film lost millions. RKO Studios nearly went bankrupt. But the financial failure was nothing compared to what was coming. 9 years after film, Pedro Armendariz starts feeling pain. Back pain, severe. Doctors run tests, find cancer, aggressive, spreading through his lymphatic system. He undergoes surgery. Radiation treatment, chemotherapy, the cancer doesn't stop. By early 1963, Armendariz knows he's dying. The pain is unbearable. Morphine doesn't help anymore. June 18, 1963. UCLA Medical Center, Los Angeles. Pedro Armendariz is 51 years old, lying in a hospital bed, dying slowly from cancer that's eating him from the inside. He has a wife, 3 children, a legacy of 43 films, and agony that won't end. He asks a friend to smuggle a gun into the hospital. The friend does. June 18, 1963. 2 a.m. Pedro Armendariz shoots himself in the chest. Dies instantly. Escapes the pain the only way left. The official cause of death, cancer. But Pedro knew the truth. Told his family before he died, that movie killed me. The dust, the desert. We were filming on a nuclear testing site and nobody told us. Hollywood mourned. John Wayne attends the funeral. He's shaken. Devastated. But he doesn't connect the dots yet. Not yet. Dick Powell, the director of The Conqueror, dies of cancer. Lymphoma. Age 58, 1966. 10 years after the film's release. Medical researchers notice something impossible. The rate of cancer among the cast and crew of The Conqueror is 700% higher than the national average. In a random group of 220 people, you'd expect about 30 cancer cases over a 10-year period. Among The Conqueror's cast and crew, there were 91 cancer diagnoses. 91. Out of 220 people. That's not bad luck. That's a plague. Researchers start investigating. Interviewing survivors, mapping out who was on set, where they filmed, how long they were exposed. They discover the truth. The Conqueror was filmed 137 miles downwind from the Nevada test site during the most active period of above-ground nuclear testing in U.S. history. The soil, the air, the water, everything was contaminated. And the government. Documents later revealed, through Freedom of Information Act requests, show that the Atomic Energy Commission was aware of dangerous fallout levels in St. George as early as 1953. They knew. And they said nothing. They sent representatives to reassure the film crew. Perfectly safe. They lied. John Wayne is diagnosed with lung cancer. Doctors remove his left lung and 4 ribs. The surgery nearly kills him. Recovery takes 9 months. During recovery, Wayne starts hearing about the others. Dick Powell dead. Pedro Armendariz dead. Agnes Moorehead diagnosed. Susan Hayward diagnosed. All of them from The Conqueror. Wayne starts asking questions, contacts researchers, wants to know if there's a connection. The answer destroys him, yes. Almost certainly. The radiation exposure. Wayne's guilt becomes unbearable. He was the star. The biggest name, the one everyone trusted. He told cast and crew members that filming in St. George was safe because the government said. He reassured parents who were worried about their children working as extras. He encouraged people to embrace the desert, to roll in the dirt for authenticity, to give the performance everything they had. And now they're dying. Because they trusted him. Because he trusted the government. 1965 to 1974. John Wayne, cancer survivor, starts visiting the others. Susan Hayward. Diagnosed with brain cancer in 1972, Wayne visits her in the hospital, sits beside her bed. She's lost her hair from chemotherapy, barely recognizes him. "Susan, I'm so sorry," he says. She smiles weakly. "Duke, you didn't know. None of us knew. But Wayne can't forgive himself. Agnes Moorehead, uterine cancer, diagnosed 1974. Wayne visits her at her home. She's 73 years old, frail, dying slowly. They talk about the Conqueror, about the desert, the dust, the Geiger counter that clicked so loudly. "Do you remember?" Wayne asks. "I said it was broken." Agnes nods. "It was trying to save us." Agnes Moorehead dies April 30th, 1974. Wayne attends the funeral, doesn't speak. Just stands in the back, silent, carrying a weight no one else can see. Through the late 1960s and 1970s, survivors and families of the dead try to sue. They sue RKO Studios. They sue the Atomic Energy Commission. They sue the US government. Every lawsuit fails. The government argues, "You can't prove the cancer came from the film set. Cancer has many causes. Smoking, genetics, random chance. You can't definitively link it to radiation exposure from 1954. Technically, they're right. You can't prove beyond doubt that any individual cancer was caused by that specific radiation exposure. But statistically, the evidence is overwhelming. 91% out of 220 people. 41% cancer rate. The national average is 6%. But statistics don't win lawsuits. Legal proof does. And the government has lawyers. RKO Studios releases a statement. "We relied on assurances from the Atomic Energy Commission that the filming location was safe. We had no reason to doubt the government's." Translation: we trusted authority. Just like everyone else. John Wayne never sues, never speaks publicly about the Conqueror and the cancer connection. But privately, to family and close friends, he admits the truth. That movie killed people. I brought them there. I told them it was safe. Their blood is on my hands. Susan Hayward is dying. Brain cancer, seizures, can't speak clearly, can't walk. She's 56 years old. Won an Oscar in 1958 for I Want to Live, one of Hollywood's greatest actresses. And she's dying from dust she breathed 20 years ago, March 14th, 1975. Susan Hayward dies at her home in Hollywood. John Wayne is one of the pallbearers at her funeral. He stands beside her casket, face stone, eyes dry, but inside he's screaming. After the service, he tells his son, "I killed her. I killed Pedro. I killed all of them. I trusted the government and I killed them." His son tries to comfort him. "Dad, you didn't know. The government lied to everyone." Wayne's response: I should have questioned. I should have protected them." John Wayne's cancer comes back. This time it's stomach cancer. Aggressive, inoperable. Doctors give him months, maybe a year if he's lucky. Wayne knows this is it. The radiation finally wins. He undergoes surgery. They remove his stomach, his gallbladder, parts of his intestines. The cancer has already spread. Too far, too deep. Wayne spends his final year in constant pain, loses 40 pounds, can barely eat, can barely walk, but he refuses to hide. He makes public appearances, does interviews, goes to award shows, because he's John Wayne. He doesn't quit, but privately, to his family, he talks about the Conqueror, about the 91 people who got cancer, about the 46 who died, about the guilt that's worse than the physical pain. His daughter asks him, "Dad, do you regret making the Conqueror?" Wayne's answer, I regret trusting the government more than my instincts. That Geiger counter was screaming at us, and I ignored it because the authorities told me to. That's the mistake that killed everyone. May 1979. 1 month before his death, John Wayne grants a final interview. The reporter asks about his legacy. Wayne talks about his films. Stagecoach, The Searchers, True Grit. Then, unprompted, he brings up The Conqueror. That was my worst film, not just artistically, morally. I trusted the government when they said it was safe to film near a nuclear test site. And people died because of that trust. That's my real legacy, teaching people not to trust blindly. The reporter, stunned, asks, "Do you think the government knowingly sent you into danger?" Wayne pauses. Long silence. "Then I think the government cared more about testing nuclear weapons than protecting American citizens. I think they lied. And I think I was a fool for believing them." That interview airs in June 1979. It causes a scandal. The Pentagon issues the Atomic Energy Commission, by then renamed the Department of Energy, releases a statement calling Wayne's claims unfounded and irresponsible. John Wayne doesn't live long enough to respond. UCLA Medical Center, Los Angeles. John Wayne is dying. Stomach cancer has destroyed his body. He's 72 years old, looks 90. His family gathers around his bed. Wife Pilar, his 7 children, close friends. They take turns saying goodbye. Wayne drifts in and out of consciousness. When he's lucid, he talks about the Conqueror. "Tell them," he whispers to his son. "Tell people what the government did. Tell them about the 91. Tell them I'm sorry." His son promises. June 11th, 1979. 5:2003 p.m. John Wayne dies. Cause of death, stomach cancer. Real cause, radioactive fallout from nuclear weapons testing in Nevada, 1953 to 1954. He's the 46th member of the Conqueror cast and crew to die of cancer. 45 more will die in the coming decades. 91% total. Out of 220 people, a death rate of 41%, the government will never officially admit responsibility. 1980. Investigative journalists dig deeper into the Conqueror story. They discover documents showing the Atomic Energy Commission knew about dangerous fallout levels in St. George as early as 1953, a full year before filming began. Internal memos use phrases like acceptable losses and necessary for national security. One memo, dated April 1953, reads, "Civilian exposure in downwind communities may exceed safe limits, but public awareness would jeopardize the testing program. Recommend continued assurances of safety." Translation: We know people are being poisoned. Don't tell them. Families of the dead try to use these documents in lawsuits. Courts rule the documents don't prove specific causation for specific cancers. The government wins every case. 1990. The Radiation Exposure Compensation Act passes. It provides financial compensation to civilians exposed to nuclear fallout from tests. But there's a catch. You have to prove you lived in a designated downwind area during specific time periods. Film crews working temporarily in those areas don't qualify. The Conqueror victims get nothing. Let's talk about the people you've never heard of. The grips, the camera operators, the makeup artists, the extras, local families from St. George who worked as background actors, children who played Mongol warriors, teenagers who helped build sets. They got cancer too. A sound technician named Robert Forrest, age 34 during filming, developed leukemia in 1967. Dead by 1969. A makeup artist named Dorothy Abbott, age 41 during filming, breast cancer. died 1968. A local teenager named Michael Preston, age 16 during filming, worked as an extra for 3 weeks. Bone cancer. Died at age 27 in 1965. The list goes on and on. 91 names. 91 families destroyed. And the government's official position remains: no definitive link can be established between the Conqueror filming and subsequent cancer diagnoses. That's not a denial. It's a legal Here's what haunted John Wayne in his final years, but he never said publicly he knew about atomic weapons. He'd made movies about World War II. He knew what the bombs did to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He knew radiation was deadly. But when the government said filming near a test site was safe, he didn't question it, because to question the government was to be un-American. And John Wayne's entire identity was built on being the ultimate American patriot. So he silenced his doubts, ignored the Geiger counter's frantic clicking, trusted authority over instinct, and 91 people paid the price. That's the guilt that killed him faster than the cancer. Not the disease itself, but the knowledge that his blind patriotism led other people into a radioactive death trap. Let's go back to 1954, the film set in St. George. The Geiger counter clicking constantly. Someone on that crew, probably a safety coordinator or a props master, had enough sense to bring radiation detection. That person knew, or at least suspected, that filming near a nuclear test site might be dangerous. The Geiger counter was screaming. Loud enough that multiple crew members noticed. Loud enough that John Wayne commented on it. That thing must be broken. Can't be that much radiation out here. But nobody checked. Nobody called a radiation expert. Nobody contacted independent scientists. Because the Atomic Energy Commission, the government, said it was safe. And in 1954 America, you trusted the government. Especially if you were John Wayne. That Geiger counter tried to save 220 lives, and everyone ignored it. Here's the part of the story that rarely gets told. The residents of St. George, Utah, who lived through the nuclear testing years. Between 1951 and 1963, they watched mushroom clouds rise on the northern horizon. They felt the ground shake. They saw ash fall from the sky. The government told them it was safe. By the 1970s, St. George had cancer rates 300% higher than the national average. Childhood leukemia rates were 800% higher. Families with no history of cancer suddenly had multiple members diagnosed. One family, the Bullock family, lost 4 children to leukemia between 1955 and 1962. 4 children. Same family, all dead before age 12. The mother, Elder Bullock, testified before Congress in 1979. The government murdered my children. They knew the fallout was dangerous, and they told us it was safe. They valued bombs more than babies. Congress offered condolences but no compensation. The Conqueror crew were outsiders who spent 13 weeks in St. George and suffered a 41% cancer rate. The residents who lived there permanently suffered even more. Thousands dead, thousands more with cancer, an entire community poisoned, all for national security. Today, 71 years after the Conqueror filming, the US government still hasn't officially admitted responsibility. The Nevada test site conducted 928 nuclear tests between 1951 and 1990. 100 of them were above-ground atmospheric tests that spread radioactive fallout across Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. An estimated 150 million curies of radiation were released, 20 times more than Chernobyl. Thousands of civilians developed cancer. Thousands died. In 1990, the government paid $759 million in compensation to some victims, but many were excluded, including the cast and crew of the Conqueror. The film itself has become a dark legend in Hollywood. It's called the most radioactive movie ever made. Copies of the film are rumored to be contaminated with radiation, though that's likely myth. The 60 tons of dirt RKO brought back to Hollywood. Nobody knows where it ended up. Probably scattered across Los Angeles, probably still radioactive, and John Wayne's legacy carries this shadow. The American hero who trusted his government into an early grave. The patriot whose patriotism killed him. Here's why this story matters in 2025. It's not ancient history, it's a warning. Governments lie. Corporations lie. Authorities lie. Not all, not about everything. But when profits or power are at stake, truth becomes negotiable. The Atomic Energy Commission lied because admitting the fallout was dangerous would have forced them to stop testing nuclear weapons. And stopping testing would have given the Soviet Union an advantage in the Cold War. So they chose bombs over people. They chose national security over human lives. And they lied to everyone, including John Wayne, to keep the program running. John Wayne's mistake wasn't trusting the government once. It was continuing to trust them even when evidence suggested he shouldn't. The Geiger counter was screaming. The sheep were dying. The residents of St. George were getting sick. All the warning signs were there. But Wayne chose patriotism over prudence, chose loyalty over logic, and 91 people paid with their lives. In the end, John Wayne was human. He made a catastrophic mistake. He trusted the wrong people, and he spent the last 15 years of his life carrying unbearable guilt. He couldn't fix what happened, couldn't bring back the dead, couldn't undo the radiation. All he could do was warn others. In that final interview 1 month before his death, he said, "Don't trust authority blindly. Question everything, even your government, especially your government, because they'll sacrifice you for their goals. They did it to me. They did it to 91 people I cared about. Don't let them do it to you." That was John Wayne's final message. Not be a patriot, not trust America, but question authority. Coming from the man who built his entire career on patriotism and American values, that's a devastating admission. But it's also his most honest moment. The moment when the myth fell away and the man remained. Broken, guilty, dying, but finally telling the truth. June 11th, 1979. John Wayne's last words to his family, "I'm sorry. Tell them I'm sorry." They knew he was talking about the Conqueror, about the 91, about the parents who sent their children to work as extras, about Susan Hayward and Pedro Armendariz and Agnes Moorehead and Dick Powell and all the others. About a Geiger counter that screamed warnings nobody heeded. About trust misplaced and lives destroyed. John Wayne made 169 films. He became an American icon. He won an Oscar. He defined masculinity for a generation. But his most important legacy might be this, a warning about the cost of blind trust, a reminder that governments lie, a lesson written in radioactive dust and 91 dead bodies. The Conqueror killed John Wayne. But before it did, he tried to warn us. We should listen, and unfortunately, they don't make men like John Wayne anymore. But maybe that's okay, because maybe we need men who question authority instead of trusting it. Maybe we need heroes who say, "Prove it's safe," instead of "the government says so." That would be John Wayne's real legacy, not the cowboy, not the icon, but the man who learned, too late, that patriotism without skepticism is just obedience. And obedience can kill you.